Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural Tux. Thank you very much for coming today, for all of us. The Toronto User Experience Group was a brainchild of the three of ours and many other wonderful contributors across the University of Toronto and across the City of Toronto. I am Daniel Wigdor of the University of Toronto.
Hi, I'm Toby Grossman from Autodesk Research.
And Ali Manzalek from Ryerson University.
Now, of course, in addition to the three of us, many people make up Tux. It is very much a work in progress. So far, we have all of these wonderful organizations from Waterloo in the west to Queens in the east and many things in between. If you are in the audience right now and your logo isn't here, we want it to be. So please, tell us and we'll make sure that you're included in the website, because the goal for Tux is to be an all-inclusive organization. I'm a big believer that things like logos and slogans matter a lot, and if you sort of blur your eyes at the screen for a moment and just let the colors that are on screen right now be the only things that you can see, and then watch the slide transition, you'll see that the Tux logo is a composition of all of the wonderful organizations that have been part of our group so far. Many people are part of this organization from an organizational standpoint. Of course, there are many other opportunities to participate, but we want to make sure we thank them all.
So Tux is going to work in the following way for this inaugural year. We are going to have two types of meetings, and we will be meeting here every 2 weeks, and we really hope you can commit to attending, and building up a community is what's going to make this organization succeed. So on alternating meetings, we will have Sanders Series invited lectures like we have today, where we'll have distinguished HCI speakers from all around the world come and speak. And then on the alternating week, we will have member presentations where from one of the institutions that's involved in Tux will be giving a talk during that week. And of course, the other purpose of Tux is not just hearing those lectures, but that reception time ahead of time and afterwards, where you can really mix and mingle and get to know other people from the surrounding area of Toronto. So we have the schedule up here. It's been emailed out. If you're not part of the mailing list, you can email one of us and we'll get you added to the mailing list, and you'll get access to this schedule. You'll notice that the meetings are mostly at the Mars Discovery District here, but they'll also be at U of T, which is a very short walk from here. The shortest walk is 9 minutes. If you want to pass the Tim Hortons, you can jot up and take the 10-minute version of that walk. And of course, Tux wouldn't be possible without our sponsorship.
So we're very grateful to our generous sponsors. So first of all, Stephen Sanders for sponsoring the invited lectures. Thank you. And of course, Autodesk. We're also very grateful. We'd like to thank Computer Science at the University of Toronto. And of course, last but not least, Mars. And then just before I hand it over to Daniel again, I want to say that for 2016-2017, we're still a work in progress, so we're planning this in an ongoing way for the coming year as well. And we want all of you to participate, both in attending the lectures and in kind of participating in this community, but also in standing up here on this stage and speaking to the audience about the work that you do. And then one last note, we have a website that's up at tux/hci.org. And then also, as Toby mentioned, there's a mailing list. So if you're not already getting the emails with the schedule and everything, but you walked in and you signed your name on that sheet, then you will be added to the mailing list. But if you haven't done that yet, then make sure that you get yourself onto the mailing list so you can get our email updates. So without further ado.
Great. Thank you. So as Toby explained, where the Tux meetings are intermingled between member presentations and Sanders Series invited lecturers. And those people who were chosen to participate in the Sanders Series are leaders in the respective fields and disciplines within HCI. and really none more so than Dr. Hrvoje Benko, who has joined us today from Microsoft. Dr. Benko was born in Croatia, and at the age of 16, moved to Pennsylvania to attend prep school to prepare himself for his wonderful academic career. He attended Lehigh University as an undergraduate, where he did work in robotics and computer vision, and among other things, helped to train dolphins to detect mines for the US Navy using computer vision techniques. He is a civilly minded person. He returned to Croatia for several months to do his civil service and help with computer infrastructure in high schools there. He returned to the United States and conducted his PhD at Columbia University with Steve Feiner. While at Columbia, Dr. Benko conducted internships at, among others, Unisys and Merrill Lynch, but moved into a purely research role with an internship at Microsoft Research, which of course led to his present position. Dr. Benko's thesis work studied digital archaeology and how to enable archaeologists to continue to study dig sites after the destructive process of excavating a site has been performed. This required him to travel to places such as Sicily and South Africa and participate in archaeological dig sites. So let it never be said that members of the WISC community don't do field research. In his role at Microsoft Research, Dr. Benko has two responsibilities. First, of course, and foremost, is being an important contributor to academia, but of course also makes product contributions as well, and has made important contributions to products out of Microsoft, such as the upcoming HoloLens, the Kinect sensor, which at the time that it shipped was the fastest and most successful product in consumer history in North America and worldwide. He made important contributions also to Microsoft Surface and led the team doing multi-touch mouse work. In this role, in the product world, he has filed dozens of patents, but of course also in the academic role, he has been a leader. Dr. Benko has published dozens of papers, many of them winning Best Paper Awards at WIST and at CHI. He has also published a textbook in Croatian in computer science, and also contributed chapters to textbooks in English that are much more accessible to this audience, myself very much included. In addition to his research at Microsoft, he makes strong contributions to the academic community and serves regularly on program committees at ACM's SIGGRAPH, WIST, CHI, ISMAR, and ITS, and also has been both the general chair and the program chair of ACM WIST. Dr. Benko has a long history of doing excellent research in human-computer interaction, focusing on digital tables in his PhD work, and moving forward to other forms of interaction, which he will be talking about today. His current research focuses on how we can break interaction out of these little glowing boxes that sit in front of us on our desks, and can help, we hope, bring about that which we all aspire to, the holodeck from Star Trek. Please join me in extending our warmest welcome to our first Sanders Series speaker, Dr. Hrvoje Benko.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Let's just move this here. Well, thank you so much. I also want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving, because I found out yesterday is Canadian Thanksgiving, so it's one day late, but happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you for coming here. It's a great honor to be the first speaker of the inaugural Tux series. If had I known the name, I would have worn a tux, but nobody. I just found out in a program that was emailed to me yesterday that it's actually called Tux. So. But I actually saw that the host also didn't wear the tux, so it's probably okay. Anyway, so as Daniel mentioned, my research, I really have a lot of different research interests. A lot of them are in the field of human-computer interaction. I'm looking at different ways that you extend the bandwidth that you interact with the devices today, whether it's through touch and digital surfaces, interactive surfaces, or in this talk, what I'll be talking about mostly is the concept of using projectors and cameras to create really creative and what I like to refer to kind of magical interactive augmented reality experiences. So augmented reality is a term that's again became popular very recently, and it just helps to kind of define it in a very simple way. In the way that I look at it, augmented reality is really about creating digital content, computer graphics that is highly, that is placed in the real world and is contextually relevant to the real world. So it's not like VR, virtual reality, which completely replaces your visual field, but it basically adds computer-generated graphics and other sensorial information directly in the space. As you might know, Microsoft has a product that's been announced called HoloLens it's really exciting in the space, and basically those are glassware computer that you wear on your head that give you an ability to engage your environment in a particular way. Now this is kind of a sample of something that looks like Minecraft. But in general, the concept of glasses-based augmented reality is not new to Microsoft. There's a lot of different glasses-based solutions out there. Some of them are better than others. What HoloLens is really interesting because it's a self-contained unit. It's a complete computing device, tracking device, localization software, as well as the display in there. But the concept of augmented reality itself is actually quite old. Some of the first head-worn displays made by Ivan Sutherland back in the 60s were actually not virtual reality, were actually augmented reality. They were see-through glasses that you can overlay the information on top of. So the concept has been brewing for a while, and I think finally in 2015, 2016, we're starting to see some really commercial devices out there. It's not really clear how it will play out, but I might, given my topic here and my focus, I would actually stipulate that there's while glasses are really powerful devices and they offer a lot of possibilities, there are actually some fundamental challenges with glasses-based augmented reality. In particular, you have to wear them. And this is me, my first year of PhD at Columbia. Things have greatly shrunk down since then, but I was tasked by my advisor to go around the city looking like a cyborg, with a backpack full of gear with tracking and GPS and differential GPS and real-time blah, 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 and a touch, a little tablet computer, things like that, recording different scenes. And I spent a lot of my 6 years of my PhD wearing devices like that. So I'm a big proponent. I totally believe in glasses, but I also think there are some challenges. Even when you shrink them down, you still have to wear them. That means you have to put them on like this. It also means that you have a very hard time understanding what the person wearing them is actually seeing or doing. So it's a very insular, very solitary experience. It's personal. It can be personalized. That's a benefit, but it's potentially also a problem. And lastly, you're really, given current optics and technologies, you're really limited in the nature of experience that you can do. So this is really what everybody envisions. This is the vision that company is putting out, my company in this case, or company I work for. But in reality, what you're experiencing is more something like this, to be very honest. You get to see a very small sliver of the information part, and you get the big picture by moving your head around and seeing the rest. This is challenging in a couple of different ways because the designing optics and designing displays to actually give you this wide periphery and shared experiences is tough. And I think we will be getting there, but it's a slow grind at this point. So I would like to offer you an alternate vision for AR, for augmented reality. And in particular, I distilled it in kind of a sentence like this: to create authentic augmented reality experiences that are situated in the real world, don't require additional gear to be worn, yet enable a high degree of interactivity with computer-generated content. So the way that my collaborators and I at Microsoft have gone about this is by really leveraging the projector and a depth camera. The Kinect camera that Microsoft released, there's several versions of it, are both basically a particular kind of camera that, in addition to the RGB, the color information of the scene, give you a depth of each pixel of that color information. And that being available in a commercial device really enables you to think and reason about the environment in a completely different way. So projectors and cameras in combination with some GPU-based computation is this fundamental building block of all the experiences that I will be talking about today in the talk. So I also, in my good academic grounding, I cannot go up here and claim that we're the first, because we are not. People have been doing projector camera systems and proposing projector camera systems before, particularly the idea of kind of the I/O bulb, the input-output, or the office of the future and things like that. Also, this term of using projectors to augment the reality is well used in the art scene in terms where people usually refer to as projection mapping. You can often see it in festivals where they turn the entire building block and put animations on them. It's tightly correlated and registered with the scene in Disney theme parks, etc. But it's important to realize how we differ and what are strengths that we're trying to leverage. We try to do everything real time. We don't assume that we understand what we're actually projecting on. So compared to projection mapping, where people come there, set up shop, scan the building, correctly map it, and then use the animators that create the animation specifically for that particular building, we don't assume anything about the scene. We really treat any surface in the environment as a display. We create procedural behaviors and renderings based on the current conditions, so everything is responsive. And we try to scale our experiences so that it scales all the way from one node to many nodes. And lastly, I really want experiences to be highly interactive and be beyond the simple controller input. Have a more analog way of interactions. But what I mean by analog is the way that mimics the experience of the real world, but still gives you this ability to use computers what computers are really well suited for, to give you the supernatural powers, to give you a way to engage in a novel way. So, okay, enough kind of setup and talk. I'm going to, and for the most of this talk, I'm going to really be showing you examples of the work and try to illustrate some of these concepts through videos. So this first talk actually is about Mirage Table. It's a project we've done back in 2011, 2012. And Ricardo Jota is sitting here in the audience. He was my intern at the time, so another Toronto connection. Me and him worked on this idea to use a projector and a camera to enable pretty much anything that you happen to put on the tabletop to become interactive. So here's a projector. In this case, it's a stereoscopic projector, so you can wear shutter glasses if you want to. And this is an old version of, first version of the Kinect. Right now, our display functions as a virtual mirror. So in other words, anything that you put on it is immediately scanned, digitized in 3D geometric way, gives you a corrective perspective view on that, and you see the artifacts of stuff of capture there. But what's really interesting is this analog nature of the interface. So you can literally use your hand in freehand way to interact with a kind of physically plausible way to interact with objects. The way that we do it, we represent your hand with proxy particles and run a physics game engine underneath to really enable you to do things like this, which in my mind is still magical even 5 years later. Where literally there is nothing there, but you perceive the existence of blocks and you can engage in a different way. We also do this particular trick, which is in order for you for projector to give you this correct perspective view, you need to understand what are you actually projecting on. So in this case, the view is correct only for the person observing this. If you look from the side, it doesn't look correct, but the magic is still there as long as we give you the perspective view when you're sitting in front of it. It also gives you this opportunity. This is something that Jota worked a lot on, which is you can basically, if you have this magical abilities to scan objects at every frame, you can construct scenes literally just by using a single block. You can build up a whole castle with a single block, and this is my personal one. You create your own little bowling scene, and then as soon as we backfill that object. We run the physics simulation, and now you can actually not only view it from different directions, but you can actually throw a ball at it and knock it down. So the boundary difference between what's real and what's virtual really starts blurring in here. Another concept I talked about is this any surface is a display. And Here's a good example. What we did is we, again, used the ProCam unit, a projector camera unit, and now we mounted it on a pan-tilt platform. We called it the Beamatron, just to kind of have a funky name. And you can actually call it around. It's capable of going and illuminating and basically putting projections anywhere anywhere in the scene. It also can track people. So here's an example of when the Beamatron turns around. It tracks people, finds people in the scene, and then locks up and gives them skeleton tracking. So here's a little dance move scene to just kind of demonstrate that. We've also built a way to localize people, because once the Beamatron turns around and it's out of your view, how do you interact with it? So we have this audio spatialization framework where you can literally call the Beamatron with that, and then it turns towards you and finds you in space.
Beamatron. Yeah, what?
Even just adding slight voice response to it makes such a more animated and more believable, friendly object. Actually, let me see if I have here. This is a good demo here to kind of really highlight the nature of every display. Every surface is a display. So we've made basically a virtual car, remote control car, which you drive with the remote control, just the Xbox steering wheel. But this car is completely projected, but it behaves in a physically plausible way. So if you run a ramp, you can, yes, you can make it, go up there, but if you go up the ramp really slowly, see what happens. You can also kick it. It's done in real time. You can flip it around. This just shows you this projective texturing enabled and disabled. And this is all because we're really assembling the entire environment and the model of the environment at runtime. So we understand exactly how the scene is changing and how is it actually behaving and how we are affecting it. Another core idea about the projector camera-based way of enabling augmented reality is that they fundamentally support shared experiences. So in contrast to how people think about virtual reality, which is a very personal experience, very isolated experience, we were really curious about how do we extend the current way that we are experiencing entertainment and current way that we experience media, and a lot of it is shared. TV is a good example of people lounging around, having this shared perspective, shared experience. There's something really nice about watching a movie together. There's something really nice about experiencing these things together. So we created an experience that really extended this idea of what would it mean to bring the TV outside of the screen and move it into the space.
Xbox, go big. Xbox, go big.
Like the power of little corporate videos. But all jokes aside, the basic principle here is actually quite simple. What we have is a projector camera unit that sits somewhere in your room. You can put it on a shelf, on a coffee table, wherever, that automatically calibrates and figures out what the geometry of your room looks like, finds where the television set is, calibrates the projection there, and then receives a signal and projects it contextually relevant to the environment. So we do a thing called We compensate both for geometric distortions of the scene, so like if you have bookshelves and whatever else you happen to have in the scene, but we also compensate for colors of your scene. So here is an example of radiometric compensation. To the left side, you see the image that we're actually projecting, and to the right, you kind of see the compensated view of live footage in there. So in other words, if you have black and white shelves, we try to, as best as possible, neutralize the effects on that. Of course, if you have a mirror, for example, or a window, we're kind of out of luck. But other than that, you can compensate quite a lot. One of the kind of the core experiences that we demo in this space is this extension of the field of view. But in many ways, I always argue when I give this demo that if you really just want a bigger TV, you should just go ahead and buy yourself a bigger TV. This is not the great way to get the bigger TV. What really started shining in this experience is when the content around the television set is not exactly just extension of the field of view, but when you use it for an artistic purpose. In this case, this is really great. When you take the lighting and the shadows from the game and just apply that to the actual environment. So you're driving this car through the overhead lights, and your room behaves in the same particular way. Now, this is completely procedurally generated. These are not real shadows or real lights. This is all coming from the same projector, but you create the illusion of that. You can also do things like theatrical lighting, like change the appearance of the room. So it can, you can highlight the edges. You can make the room look black and white, or apply a shader like the Borderlands game shader, which is all kind of outliney to do that. And now you can start playing tricks with illusions. You can hallucinate motions. To me, these are really powerful. This is the pure example of augmentation that you can do that really engages you. It's contextually relevant to the content and what you're actually currently doing, but it's making your environment and your scene respond in an unexpected, almost magical way. So this generated a lot of different press. For a research project, getting close to 5 million is great. If you're just showing cat videos on YouTube, you probably are at 60 to 100 million views. But for a research project, not bad. But really what it gave us is a freedom to think big. We started thinking beyond just a single ProCam unit, and then we started thinking about how could we scale this experience to the entire environment. I also want to point out, whenever I'm talking about these things, there's a lot of other people that are involved, and I try to mention both where the collaborators underneath and also where this work was published. So if you guys are interested in following up or something like that, you can jot that down and find. A lot of these videos are available online, and also the papers are available as well. So going back to the idea, so if you look at each individual projector camera unit, the way that we think about it is a projector, Kinect camera, projector, and some computational unit, or GPU. When we designed the RoomAlive system, we really scaled it up. We just went up, and in this case, did 6, but the system can support a lot more, and they're all networked. So this is how it looks in our lab. It's a little messy. The commercial version wouldn't look like this, just kidding. But for us, for testing out, it's fine. And this project has been going on for a couple years now, so we've also, in this case, we worked with old cameras, but we've also upgraded the experience with the new cameras and tried different things in there. The crucial thing about this is that we don't assume, again, anything about the experience. So the system auto-calibrates, and I'm going to just show you a brief snippet of here. So each projector projects these gray code patterns that are imaged by all the other cameras, which allows you to figure out the structure of the room, but it also allows you to figure out the relationship between the units themselves, like where's this projector with respect to the other projectors and things like that. So this goes on for a while because there's 6 of them, but what you get out of it is you get kind of 6 registered experiences, 6 registered parts that end up blending together. And this is pretty much the same scene that I showed you in the beginning. And this is a view, for example, a 3D model of the environment that you get after you're done with calibration. The way to test whether our model actually is correct and how tight it is by looking at reprojecting, for example, the edges onto the real world. And then you see the errors and you see the tightness of fit. So in numbers, we had one living room. We had 4 interns and a visiting researchers, and together with a couple of researchers from Microsoft Research. It was really kind of a skunks works game design team that worked on that for 2 summers. And we enabled 6 projectors and 6 cameras and 6 computers with 2 tracked users and also a spatial 3D sound spatial engine in there, which I won't really talk much about, but you had to wear headphones if you wanted to hear that particular sound, to experience experiences kind of like this.
Good day. Sammy.
You'll also see a blooper here. It's but the idea is, again, we're enabling you to use your movement, your touch in this case, to create an experience that is completely organic to your space. So this particular whack-a-mole is just there's nothing scripted about this part except that we understand where the surfaces are, where the objects are, and then we place the thing and enable people to interact. We also enabled kind of a little gun shooting environment. I cannot often show this demo because some people object to the toy gun part, but
Over here.
it showcases the capabilities of the system. You can also do kind of a just controller-based running around in kind of a MacBot style experience. There were 4 guys there for the summer, living in the same space pretty much, so a lot of shooting went on in the room. But this brings me to the important section that I want to spend a little bit more time on, and which is how do you actually author experiences like this? How do you create something that can really take advantage of this extra graphics, but without necessarily knowing what you're shooting on? So we made an early decision on to really expose all these controls in a game engine that is familiar to the game designer, so that we can recruit students that are basic and game designers that are familiar with these tools, and they can start using these tools directly. So that literally gives you a chance to kind of go into space, look at some problem, and then go back to the computer and see the real-time version of whatever you were just looking in the space and manipulate it, change the, bring a different shader on top of it, and see it at runtime for real right there in the room playing out for you. Just being able to integrate the tools together, it brings tremendous power to the creative folks, because all of a sudden you want to try some procedural material, something like that, it becomes super trivial to kind of put that in. But the authoring challenges are still there. As I said, the environment is unknown at design time, so we spend a lot of time trying to create higher level abstractions, try to kind of understand the space. We worked on extracting the scene polygons and labeling them to try to understand, what is a floor, what is a wall, what is the elevated surface, and then if you have a certain surface configurations, we've started labeling them as chairs and couches and things like that, kind of a higher meta level meanings. But this also allows you to start thinking about them as separate units, and you can assign separate kind of texture coordinates. Once you can do that, you can start really texturing the environment. And making that making that procedural. So let me show you an example. Here's an example of just surface shading, or basically applying different procedural textures. So this is a rain scene in RoomAlive, where the floor is different from the walls, and et cetera. Kind of changing the experience of the space. There's also challenges from the design perspective that designers are really uncomfortable with, and that is that they're not in complete control of the experience. In most games, if they design a video game, if they design the movie or anything like that, they're kind of in complete control. They can, especially for storytelling. One of the big problems for us was that we need to direct a focus of people in RoomAlive. We need to kind of highlight certain parts. Where should they look, and how should they understand the space, because otherwise they might even miss something that's important to the particular experience. So it really took designers a while to get up to speed, to start thinking about that, to start kind of rocking those design challenges. At dinner yesterday, we were talking especially about that, and I think ultimately these new technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality will create a new interaction vocabularies. Just like right now in cinema and movies, you have a particular vocabulary that people use in trying to convey certain motions and certain emotions. The same stuff will be native to this new media, such as virtual reality and AR. And lastly, we also noticed that the magical experiences really happen when the virtual stuff starts interacting with the real world. So we really started pushing on that and trying to kind of push that even further. Here's like one serendipitous discovery. Like the designer, Mike, who was working on this, left a curtain there and it was blowing, and he was actually working on this flame on the box, but the curtain kept hitting the real, the curtain kept hitting this real cupboard, this real sideboard table, and it's a pretty magical experience. Let me play it again. I don't know, this kind of stuff just, I love this kind of stuff. So. We actually loved it so much that second year, we've invited a game designer to design a complete kind of almost a theme ride experience in RoomAlive. And I'll only play you a little brief snippet, but the idea was that it's a haunted house, but it's your own house, it's your own room, and you get to meet whoever lived there before. And they're pretty freaky. This was all acted by my interns, but what you see is actually, you see from the third person perspective, nothing looks correct. But when you sit in the chair, you meet this other person, and the person is, completely interactive and tries to get you to do different things. We also tried, eventually this gets really scary, and the floors and windows and everything starts shaking, and you lose a little bit of a sense of stuff, but it's a fun experience.
Was it a long time?
So one of the more successful effects is this effect towards the end of this video, where the idea is that you just basically create a virtual mirror. And again, it's a spotlight with that, all you're seeing yourself in there. And at some point, we actually mess around with that too, and we saw this person who was there before kind of just lurking over your shoulder in the mirror as you're playing with it. So using these ideas to create lightweight augmentations, and then breaking this boundary between what's virtual and what's real becomes a really interesting tool to creating and authoring these experiences. Another interesting challenge with projector-based augmented reality is this idea that you need to create perspective views. So I just want to make a little separation. I oftentimes, in the talk so far, I've talked about surface shading, and really what I mean by that is changing the textures on the existing surfaces in the environment. Those are not view-dependent effects. Those are the effects that everybody in the room is going to have a same, because they coexist in the same plane, they will have the same perspective, the same shared understanding. That's the kind of projecting rain on the floor, or some of the aluminum effects, and et cetera. But if you want to have a view-dependent effect, the way to do it, you need to understand where the person is looking at. So the artists have been doing that for a while, and they often assume a particular location that you're going to be experiencing this from. This art can be actually quite powerful, but as soon as you step out of it, you don't get the same view. Actually, one of my favorite examples is this one, and I think this is in a garage in Australia, where if you're in the correct perspective, you will actually see in, or up, or down, or out. But if you happen to come from a wrong perspective, you actually almost cannot read it. This message doesn't mean anything to you because it's not. You don't have the correct perspective on this. So we're in the same problem with perspective renderings, and I showed you many different ways how to actually create one for the single user. But how do you do that for multiple people? Well, we've noticed a particular configuration that is actually quite conducive to having multiple simultaneous views. So in this RoomAlive setup, if you have user 1 and user 2, and if you have a projector and camera unit on the ceiling 1 and 2, you can notice that most of the stuff that user 1 will be seeing is going to be actually projected onto the user 2's body and the background over there. Similarly, same thing for the user 2. Most of the stuff that they'll be seeing is going to be projected on the other side and not really impacting the way that they are looking at this. So how does this projective rendering performed? Well, this is how we do it. We basically compute the location of the user that we are trying to synthesize the view for and compute what they should be seeing in the scene. So in this case, I'm actually showing the periphery. I'm showing everything that's gray is the real world. But in the final rendering, we would not be rendering the real world because the real world already exists. But I'm just showing it for context here. So this globe is the virtual thing that we want to add from the perspective of the first user. This is what's actually projected by our projector. It ends up being distorted because their body is in the scene. But this is what's imaged in the scene. This is how it looks. Similarly, for the second perspective, this is, again, the pipeline in there. And then what you get is something like this. The left side is what our computer is thinking that you should be seeing. The right side is the GoPro camera on your head trying to understand what you're seeing. You can also enable it. You can enable people to touch this experience and do it in a similar way that we've done before to really kind of add this extra layer of interactivity on top of the experience. So this is actually done with the latest version of our system. So it just kind of showcases the overall quality of what we can achieve. Again, this car does not exist. This is just the camera. And some of these effects, I have to admit, are better in monocular camera view than they are in reality, because your brain is still, even though you're comprehending that the object is spatially coherent and that it's somewhere in space, you're still seeing it projected on the available surfaces. We've also played with a bunch of different games. So here's another shooting game where you can summon a fireball and then literally throw it at another person. And the way that's implemented, if you actually look at the kind of a Unity view, is pretty straightforward. You're just literally throwing something. Now, if you don't dodge, you end up just hitting them. Again, some particles are representing what you're seeing there. But what's more interesting to me is this example where we're playing catch. Now, this is playing imaginary catch. There's nothing there. But you still have enough information that you know exactly where to put your hand, how to do it, and just, me and Andy playing catch with virtual balls in a scene. The first time we did it, we giggled for a long time because we didn't really think it was possible, but it's definitely possible. This again shows you kind of the completeness and power of the whole scene. So we ran a couple user experiments, and I won't dwell too much time on this because it's most of the details are there. But basically, in our experiments, we've confirmed that people have even though they don't have any stereopsis information, any stereo information about fusing these images, they have a very good sense of where these objects are in the space. And the closer they are to their respective surfaces that they're projected on, the better the estimation and the better the people are in doing that. And also, we've noticed that when you're talking to another person and they're referring to something that's actually happened to be between the two of you, you actually have a very good sense of that as well. So you do know what the other person is talking about, even though the objects that he's talking about are really projected in the background of you. So let's talk about some stuff that hasn't been published yet. This is going to be presented at WIST in about a month. And in this case, we looked at this configuration of how do you help the existing augmented reality glasses do a little bit better? So I'll show you first what I mean where they need help. So these are a couple examples of existing glasses. And this is the view this is a directly imaged view from the glasses. So it's about 40 degrees diagonal if you look at two eyes. And this is very equivalent also, by the way, what, on the order of, on the same scale for what you can see in the HoloLens as well. Now, we back project in this case your correct view. We basically backfill the scene with the projector-camera system, so that the glasses and the room act in concert together and give you this wider scene. So we track your glasses using kind of third-party trackers, and again have a little magical projector-camera system here that allows you to basically, if you're looking over somebody's shoulder, you do see this. This area, the little inset over here, is the one where you can see what the glasses can actually see, and the rest of the stuff is basically back projected view. Now, of course, it's really interesting from the design and user interface perspective of what content do you choose to put in glasses and what content do you choose to put in the projector. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to show you a few experiences that are possible. Like, for example, this one where the helicopter just kind of moves around the world, around the room and shines stuff. It's almost impossible to capture this one in the glasses because it just moves so much. You're literally strained to just keep it in view. But if you have this contextual information, it becomes possible. Another one that's really interesting is if you think about a telepresence experience where you're talking to somebody and you're seeing their view. This is just a depth rendering view. It's really hard to actually capture this because of the contrast ratio between the glasses and the projection is so high. But you can kind of see what they're actually seeing if you just look on the side versus what's on the periphery. Another example of kind of extending this RoomAlive experience is we started noticing that we can potentially have RoomAlive in multiple different rooms, and you can use it to really enable this face-to-face experience. So this is going to be presented at CSEW in the spring. And the idea was to really create an experience where two people in two different locations can inhabit, we can capture their appearance, and we can situate them accordingly into your space. So remote person's geometry is captured by the Kinect. It's captured and sent over to your room, projected. We also find all the available seating spaces and actually map you directly into your chair. So even if you don't, so that way you're really inhabiting the same space rather than projecting a full chair around. That also brings some interesting parts because the system is completely dynamic. If you choose to, maybe you don't like where you're sitting, well, you sit there and it automatically remaps into a new position. It tries to optimize both for a face-to-face conversation, so it tries to give you the correct view, or if it cannot, it tries to rotate you, such as, for example, this 90-degree arrangement, to keep all the conversational aspects exactly the same. We've also done an upgrade of this where, now remember in RoomAlive everything was on the ceiling, so you had all these artifacts of capture. If you put the projector and the cameras together in one little unit like this, then you can have a greatly improved both the capture and the presentation, and you just literally plop it in there. We're actually envisioning something like this to be kind of a little unit that you can place on the table. Here you see my collaborator, Andy, and we're, it's me on the other side. So you can kind of see what the experience looks like. Again, it kind of actually matches and uses the best of all worlds because you're projected very close to the actual surface that you're sitting in. You also have all this perspective stuff. And we've conducted, actually, it's working in the lobby of our building there. We've actually conducted a lot of interviews and a lot of different things where we just sit down in two different rooms and just experience it. And after a while, you completely get observed in the fact that in your conversation, the actual technology kind of disappears. All right, so I'm almost out of time, but before that, I hope that I've showed you a glimpse of possibilities of how can you create experiences that are authentic to the augmented reality and to your existing world with projectors and cameras. So if you feel inspired to do this, and I would encourage students to do it, we've actually open sourced the toolkit, and I'm here to do one plug. It's an open source toolkit that handles some of the gnarliest problems that we've seen people have with this stuff. It basically allows you to completely calibrate many different configurations of depth cameras and projectors together. So in this case, you can see like 3 of them here on the table. And really, again, it's an automatic toolkit that does all the capture and all the nonlinear solvers to give you the complete picture, both the intrinsics of the projectors as well as the kind of oppose and extrinsics of all the other system there. And not only that, but we've also given you the kind of the simple shaders that give you perspective views. So here's a very hello world example where we're tracking you with a fourth Kinect, just tracking your position, and giving you, overlay of this information over a random scene in the environment. So if you're interested to actually play around with this, create your own rooms, do some fun stuff, it's open source, get it on GitHub, and contribute back to the whole project. So at this point, I would just really like to thank my collaborators. Most of this work has been done in collaboration with Andy and with Eyal, and as well, it would not be possible without all the interns and visiting researchers and faculty who have worked with us over the years. It's been really fun to kind of create a little bit of a momentum and get a group going on that. But thank you so much for listening. Hope this was a great inaugural talk, and if you have any information, you can ask me now or later. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Benko. Two students, Nicole and Varun, have wireless microphones. The talks are being recorded, so we ask that you please speak into the mics. In the interest of community building, please introduce yourself when you ask a question. But Benko has been kind enough to leave lots of time for questions from the audience. Just put up your hand and... I'll let you moderate.
Sure. Go ahead.
Interaction. So with the kind of analog interactions you were referring to, you said, first time you said it takes a little while, but you get used to it. Like, tell us a bit more about the experience of people who are interacting with these augmented objects.
What I meant by it takes a little while and get used to it is mostly in this, I think this last experiment of the virtual telepresence, it's actually, what was really surprising to me is how quickly people get lost in the conversation and not really worry about technology, which for me is a great sign because I think we're getting beyond this. I mean, there's many different things that are positives and that are kind of benefits of this particular experience. One is it's a life size, and just the fact that you have almost a complete body there, and the body that appears to be in your space. That's really important because we segment you from your chair. We can also transmit the chair if you want to, but we segment you from the chair and we placed you in the existing seating arrangement in the space. That automatically, even though you're remote, you appear to that person as if you're having that conversation right there in place. So those things I think are critical if you want to have the experiences that people start focusing more on the task than the user interface, right? In terms of the interaction, I think there's also an aspect there. A lot of the sensitivity and a lot of the brittleness of these experiences are having to do with how do you actually enable, for example, touch or holding an object or doing something like that. For us, I think is we wanted to use game engines. This again goes back to the discussion last night. We wanted to use game engines, and with game engines, they're basically physics engines that simulate physical behaviors. But if you have capture of 3D information, you don't actually end up knowing all the things that you need to know for a game engine, for a physics engine to run. You don't know what the mass of the geometry that you're doing is. You have no complete picture. You don't know the full extent of this. So we always resort to approximating the geometries with some proxy particles or some other systems to make it basically work within the physics system. And that's, I think, a lot of the brittleness of the approach comes from that. But once you kind of understand the basic premise, I think it's very natural. I mean, holding a ball and dropping it down, there's really not much you need to be teaching people there. Sure.
Hey. Eugene Fiume, University of Toronto. Really nice talk. So in those examples or the configurations where you have kind of an extended display using projector technology, I wonder if you've done any eye gaze experiments to see where kind of off-foveal things might be kind of where you can use sort of levels of detail or kind of do depth of field or restrict information as a function of where the person's looking.
Great question. So we haven't done eye tracking part, but in that work we've actually specifically worked with game designers, with the game studios at Microsoft, and again, while most folks who see the demo for the first time, they're always most kind of blown away by okay, let's extend the TV and make it very large. think after you use it for a little bit of time, the subtlety and these extra effects end up being really, really interesting and really critical. So one of the things that even just, for example, selectively showing some content. For example, we had a mode where you only show, if the enemy comes from the side, or you need to pick up something on the floor, or an explosion happens, something that can actually really affect the gameplay, but we don't overwhelm you with everything else. We've also done experiments where we remove all the color and we just do we do an edge effect over the scene. And I actually, when I played that, I get much more immersed with that because it follows the way that your eye functions and the peripheral motion in that case. The periphery of your eye is much more sensitive to contrast and motion and things like that, and not really sensitive to color. So if you exaggerate those things, you end up having more of a kind of a tunnel effect on there. And we've definitely played with that. We haven't done gaze tracking in that particular experiment, because we kind of, as a guiding principle, it was always that the focus should be on the TV. So the content, like everything pretty much, for you to get that experience, everything is playing out on the TV, and the periphery is enhancing the experience. So we really weren't trying to get you completely distracted and look away or something like that, but it's a great point. Yep.
Paul Milgram. Thank you. I have two questions. When you introduced the immersive room, you showed 3 people sitting near each other. But then when you talked about multi-users, you had people on opposite sides of the room.
Sure.
So do you have any sense when people are sitting near each other, and you have this one projection, how far apart
great
they
question.
can go before it breaks down?
Let me see. I think it very much is akin to this experience, where everybody is very familiar with this one. If you come to the theater and you don't come early, you'd never sit in a sweet spot for the movie. However, most of the action happens far enough that your brain has no problems interpreting that scene and getting immersed in the content and doing something like that. We found, actually what was surprising in the Lumiroom projects, we never really did any perspective renderings for any particular perspective. We just left it where the projector was. And we found that the sweet spot for the experience is actually quite large. It extends to the couch and the kind of surrounding areas. And even if you're on the side, you still get a very good experience. Now, of course, you're absolutely right. If you were rendering objects that fall out of the TV and get closer to you and break that kind of wall, the view-dependent part is really critical, yes. Yeah. But most of the experiences that we've played with and things like that, things were at the distance of the wall and beyond, and that helped.
Okay.
But I think this effect is actually, I mean, this is completely what makes it all possible in many ways. I think that your brain is very good at canceling out these perspective distortions and believing the scene, especially if you get immersed, much more than you would think.
So as long as it doesn't come out at you.
Right.
And my second question is, have you had occasion to think about trying to project images that are behind surfaces? Sounds like no.
I'm not sure.
If you want thing to appear to be behind something.
Yes. So one of the views that I haven't shown, in Illumiroom, we also do a segment. Illumiroom has a bunch of different effects. I don't know if I have the video for that one, but we do the segmentation automatically of the geometry. So we can very easily make it appear that that the game is being played just behind your furniture and your furniture is lit. Actually, when you look at here, this is a good example. So right now, in order for us to reproject this image sorry. What happens when the large talks? So in order for us to reproject this shaking image of the room, we actually need to segment the room from the game, and we oftentimes so we'll let the game be played in the background and shake the room in the foreground.
That's not really what I meant. I mean, in order for the surface to appear to be transparent, So you keep the surface, but you have an object behind it.
Oh, just in depth, like prospectively in depth? Yeah, but I think all of those, I mean, this is basically, this is giving you the perspective view into the distance. Most of these objects are far away from the surface. That's kind of the basic mode of operation. I might not be getting your question, so maybe find me a little bit later.
Ron Becker, University of Toronto. We were talking about augmented reality, but most of the examples are what I would call augmented non-reality. I'm wondering if you had considered doing anything that might be augmented reality in a very deep sense. For example, helping seniors with dementia re-experience things that they have forgotten, or helping returning soldiers with traumatic stress injury re-experience things that they want to forget, but perhaps therapeutically might help them to re-experience.
So in this particular work, we haven't done that. The closest that we can that I can say that what we've played with is the idea is to automatically highlight certain portions. I mentioned briefly about the idea of directing people's focus, and I think it's really important when you can literally kind of highlight certain things, and that same technology could be used to help with memorization and things like that, where you literally direct their views to find a particular spot. In terms of the post-traumatic stress disorder part, actually, so that's an open question. I don't know whether the augmented reality technology is the best way. I actually think that the virtual reality experiences there are much more virtual reality technology is much more well suited for those experiences and generating that. But I haven't done any research there.
I'm not suggesting that it was necessarily a good idea. I was just suggesting that it was an idea.
Well, in that case, I'm glad I didn't do it. I don't know.
Okay, I'm afraid that we have to stop there, but Dr. Benko will be hanging around a little bit after his talk before he proceeds to U of T. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. It's wonderful to see the turnout. Ali, Tovi, and I are all very excited. Thank you very much. We'll see you here, at U of T in 2 weeks. Directions on the website. Sign up for the mailing list. Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Benko.